Outstanding, man.
Ai mi kia koutou I tai mai I tēnei ata, ko tēnei hui ngā o te committee Māori. I tēnei wā ka hurita rākau ki a koe api, ki te mihi ki te whakatiwhera tātou mai, tēnei ata.
Tihei Māori ora. Pai te Claudia o te atua I Rangarawa. Maungarungo ki te whenua whakaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. E mihi tūtahi māku ki te Rangarawa. Nāna nei ngā me katoa I hanga. I ngā mate, me ngā tini aitua o ngā marae kārangatanga maha. Ka mihi ka tangihia tātou I tēnei wā. Apiti ona tātai hono, a rātou te honga mat ki a rātou. A moi mai rā, ngā tangi, ngā mate, o tuweki o te marama. Hare atu rāna, ngā rangatira, a wirama, a mōna mā. Hare atu rā e takoto mai. Nā reira, apiti hono tātai hono, tātou te kanohi ora ki a tātou ku hui mai nei. A tēnā koutou, a tēnā tātou katoa. E te whānau ku hui mai nei. Whānau o tēnei rohe, o te kaunihera, te matua Māori. Ka nū te mihi, ka nū te aroha ki a koutou, ki a tātou I tēnei wā. Nau mai haere mai hoki mai, ki te mura o te ahi, I tēnei rangi, I tēnei wiki. Nā reire te whānau, kia kaha mai, kia maia, kia manawa nui. Nā reire, ka rero I taku kōrero I tēnei wā, nā reire ka nū te mihi, ka nū te aroha ki a koutou, ki a tātou I tēnei wā. Nā reira, ki noi tātou. A titira mai, ki te karakia o tēnei rangi. I'm just going to start off with a couple of new verses to the top, and then we'll carry on. Whakataka te ua ki te uru. Whakataka te ua ki te taonga. Whakataka te hau ki te uru. Whakataka te hau ki te taonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hi ake ana te atakura e tio, e huka, e hau, ti hei Māori ora. Nā reira, whakamoimiti kia koe e te matua kāro. Me ngā kia pūwai tō aroha I roto o mātou nākau katoa. Koe nā te me nui o tēnei au hurihuri. Ki ngā piki, ngā heke o te wā. Tautoko mai, a whina mai ngā whānau katoa. E māwiwi ana, e taima ana, I roto nei te hui pera me te kāinga. Me ngā whānau kiri mate, e mamai tonu te nākau I tēnei wā. Piki te kaha, piki te ora, piki te māramatanga. Nā reira te matua ka harawa, I enoi ana mātou I runga tingo te matua, a te tama me te wairua tapu, ki tonu atu, āmane. Tūturu whakamoa ki a tēnā, haumi e hui e, ai ki ariora.
Ai, tū tēnei ki te mihi ki a koe rā, me ki rato tātou pihopa I te ata nei. O reira ko tā koe mihi ki a koe rā, kia tai ai te tangata ki tēnā te taumata ki te atu. Me ki rā ngā mihi mō tea, mō rātau kua mene atu. Tēnei te mihi ki a koe rā, te rangatire, te whanaunga e api, tēnā koe, tēnā tātā.
Mōrena koutou ai, I tautoko ngā mihi ki a koe api I te whera tātou hui, I tēnei ata, he karakia me ngā mihi, ki a rātou he kahinga ki ta karangahini nui te pō, me ngā kānoi ora, I tai mai I tēnei rā, ka nui te mihi ki a koe api. So welcome everybody to the Māori Standing Committee meeting for this month. to our members online, zooming in, and of course to the public who will be viewing this through the live stream webcast. Just once again, thank you to everybody. First and foremost, apologies. We do have apology for Uncle Bill and Uncle Hami. Were there any other apologies?
Paura, Zach and Roger Marker.
So we've got Paura, Zach and Roger Marker.
Chief Executive, an apology from James. He's COVID stricken.
James Palmer. Is that us? Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Peter. And yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, long already. Anyway, kia ora. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Carried. Were there any notices? I do have one notice. If you look to our agenda, it is proposed that we have lunch at 12 o'clock, but looking to close at 1:15. Can I suggest that if we are on time, that we try and push to close, and then we'll have lunch for those that have to carry on. Ka pai? Thank you very much. Any other notices? If not, moving along, please. Conflicts of interest or declaration to our agenda? Apart from being Māori, was there anything else? Nothing else, thank you. Alternate board members, I do believe we have one.
Yeah, two.
Well, yeah, we're two. So Marge and of course Diane. So I need a mover and a seconder to thank you Hinawai and thank you Api. All those in favour please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, carried. Moving to item 4, confirmation of minutes held on the 2nd of February 2022. You've had these minutes for some time. Were there any omissions, corrections or matters arising?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you. Moved, Hinawai. Seconded, Rose. If there are no corrections or omissions or matters arising, I'm going to take them as, thank you. All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Carried.
Aye.
Okay, then item 5, Takiwā reports. So we do have a couple of that have been furnished, and we have two verbals. Can I go to Wairoa first, please, Michelle?
Hi. I think Anna Lee or someone's got my stuff here today. Hello, Kate.
If she says next slide, just.
Kia ora whanau. So this is one report from executive side. So that is the Tauranga Bridge that we were notified yesterday that has been closed. As you can see, the pylon is on a lean, and that is it pretty much demonstrates the force of the Waipuke flooding we had in Te Wairoa, most definitely concentrated in this area. Next one, please. Annalie. This is the Wairoa Frasertown Bridge, Te Kapua. And just on the left there, you have only metres away the Frasertown School, so it's gouged down even more. Banks and a lot of erosion there, and it's all ended up in
Sorry.
and that's just giving you a closer shot of how close it is to the actual primary school. And they've got retaining walls and everything there, but it's not going to save that bank, unfortunately. Go to the next one. This is, well, this is for me and you, girl. This is at the Waio. So as you can see, this is above where water sources for the town, and the Water District Council had to cut off the water source for a couple of days because it was so full of sediment, that they couldn't treat it. And so as you can see the mud there, you can imagine that's how high the river was, the Waio, and it's flowing in. So that road's, a lot of roads around there, what a mess. Thank you, next one. And I pushed this from Tāhaidit from Nathan Heath's report. So that gives you an idea of the devastation, where the concentration was in Ruakaturi, Mangapueke, up your way, Katarina, the Waio around there.
I'll be brief.
Yeah, inland Taringa, those areas, they were the area that got hit the most with the rain. So there we go again, similar scenery to Cyclone Mola. And there's highly erodible lands, Ruakaturi. Ruakaturi is where the Waitree place kaupapa is supposed to occur. There's your reason why. Kia ora. I think that's it.
That's good.
Thank you for that, Michelle. Were there any questions for Michelle and for our Wairofana?
I just had one question. I just one in one of the shots on the river, Michelle, and then you could see all the flooding on the left-hand side and the damage was on the right-hand side, and it wasn't clear in the image, but I suppose some of the, when you talk about riparian planting, and that didn't seem to be in fence line or anything on the opposite side of the river, and I suppose as we move forward to keeping the awa clean, it'd be, I suppose through riparian planting on that waterway, hey, that may be a future good project. Obviously, you had to talk to the farmer possibly that owns that whenua, but it didn't look like there was no fence protecting, and with the legislation coming in around that, you would know more about that than me, but it didn't show that in the photo.
Yeah. That would make a big difference. There's just so many kilometres of our fence off, but it is happening up here. Kaori Te Whenua, they're fencing 53 kilometres, and a lot of and our local farmers, not just Māori landowners, are getting in there and doing that. But it's the highly erodible lands. I mean, we're known for it. Tairāwhiti, Wairo. So the issue doesn't go away, and the sediment, the depth of the sediment that's especially around town at the mouth. There's tonnage. We've lost acres from that flooding. So and it's all gone into the Puawa. It's just getting worse for it, and now it's affecting human water. So there you go, human drinking water. So the second obligation of Te Manawa Te Wai, you've got to have potable water. We have drink water for human health. And the sedimentation is that bad that they had to sit on their reserves. So what do you do if it had kept them after 2 to 3 days was our backup? So there you go. We're reaching Te Manawa Te Wai already. So we need to have some focus back on the highly eroded lands and water and the erosion problem. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Anyway.
Kia ora, Michelle. Thank you for your update, and ka oroha ki te whānau I kora, just over those last days of heavy rainfall. And so we've been made aware at council around the mouth being opened up or the bar widened before, the heavy rainfall. Can you give us a bit of an update around any concerns during that time, and maybe some of the effects afterwards, like has the bar sort of come back to a high level, and just the state of what's happening at that mouth?
I did have a photo and I didn't put it in. The bar is really wide, and so we've got two openings. The old opening, which is further down into Whakamahi, and where the opening was made by the regional council, and I've got to say that probably saved our property. the mouth is, everybody's commenting, I don't know if it's shallow there, but everybody is commenting on how wide it is, which is really good, and it's saved that it saved the damage on the properties, but it also in our well too, when it floods like that, it cleans out the awa. But unfortunately, when it's cleaned it out, it's taking the sediment down into the other end. So I don't know what the depths are, but the bar is really wide. The photo behind me is a back from 1990, when Tamatea Ariki Nui Wakatawa came through the mouth of the Wairua River, and yeah, it's a photo we put up on our page last night, and it's got over 2,000 views. That the mouth was wide there, you can see, so it's really important that they stay open. And just a shame it isn't white bathing season, because it would be awesome. Now like that, mahinga kai. But yeah, no, great job there. Much appreciated about the mouth opening, and it just, they only made a little cut, and whew, that mouth's huge, eh, that girl. I think everybody's really pleased about that. Appreciate it.
Kia ora, Michelle.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And to our Wairoa whānau, thank you very much for your report. Can we go to Tamatea, please? Lake Whātuma.
Morena whānau. I'm standing in for Roger today, and we've got a verbal report, but more importantly, this is Roger's baby, Lake Whātuma. So this presentation is merely a concept design that's being socialised with mana whenua in Tamatea, and obviously today we're socialising it with Hawke's Bay Regional Council just to show how far we've got with the design. And it's quite long, so we're just going to sprint through it. Yeah. Yeah, it's about 30 or 40 pages, and we don't want to go through that.
No, we don't.
No, we don't. No, absolutely not. We'll just keep zooming past it. So basically, it's a concept at this stage that once it's been socialised, it will move to a feasibility stage. There's a working partnership with the CHB District Council currently, and obviously with local marae in Tamatea. So there's lots of concepts within the project, such as a nursery, obviously a boardwalk, which is obviously envisaged to go right around half of the lake that we have. Yeah, there are lots of concepts that we've obviously taken from various projects dotted around the rohe here in Hawke's Bay, bird hides, an amphitheatre obviously, and Marge is just going to keep rolling through this. So one of the big things that we talked about was using it as an educational centre, not just, you know, come and look at the birds and then get in your car and drive off. So it was quite important for us to start looking at how we were going to connect our rangatahi to the project, and it was obviously through an educational centre and a learning centre. Obviously it's in stages. We're not going to build it all at once should it get to that stage, but it will be obviously a staged approach. The most important place to Kai and connection. Same thing, educational, using those knowledges that we've got in our local area. This is all still part of that learning centre. It's a fire pit. Same thing here, where we're looking and we've been talking about connecting to our local education providers. So in Waipukaro we've got a EIT Learning Centre as well as our CHB College. So those were our starting points to start to engage with our rangatahi and promote our educational centre and learning centre on the lake. And that's just, yeah. So this concept design has been put together by a local company that had undertaken the Ngā Ara Tipuna project already. So this is just another extension of a new project in Waipukurau with Lake Whātuma. Any questions? Don't ask hard questions.
I just like to say it looks great, and then I know with myself and Toro, we attended the original concept design when you were talking about with the Central Hawke's Bay District Council when they were doing the other planning, and yeah, it fits in with the brief that they presented back then, and I think it'd be awesome for our Central Hawke's Bay whānau for that project, and just want to recognise the potential of the project that, if as you go through your stages. So ngā mihi, good presentation, and be looking forward to going for a visit when you open it up.
Absolutely. We'll take you.
Kia ora, thank you for that. How does this work? Is it related to the efforts to restore Whātuma? Because there's quite a number of issues down there, and the council's wrestled with them unsuccessfully, I might add, starting with the decision many years ago to lower the lake area. I've always thought we should have put a weir in and restored it to a level. Secondly, there's a lot of willows and stuff in there. There's multiple ownership, there's dock, there's all those things. So are you going to try and be a catalyst for bringing all of these elements together and getting some 12 boots on and kicking butt until we get some things done?
Do you want to? No? Yeah, I understand. There's quite because that lake has got lots of neighbouring properties sitting on the shores of it, I guess. But I guess for Tamatea, we're only interested in is it the western part of the lake? The west, there's a side that
treaty.
Yes, because there's a treaty claim on a particular side. So we've got that. Where obviously this is the concept design sitting around that part of the lake, but I have seen the report about landowners, water security, feeding water in, flushing water into there. So it is quite a large, a large piece of work to get through, to get even to that concept stage. So there is a lot of background work that Uncle Roger will have to undertake, no doubt.
Oh, you got to give it to Uncle Roger.
He's part of that committee.
He has said it's his baby. That will be his baby that he wants to really to undertake and push along. So, yeah. Well,
we did have a couple of terms ago hotspots as topics for the council had to try and fix, and. One of them was Lake Whātuma, and I won't go into who's who and names and factual, but they got the job and did virtually nothing with it. I'd have thought it would be something you might want to consider with Uncle Roger and his life work, to come back and suggest the council identify Whātuma as a hotspot, to form a particular committee of council and others to draw together all the work to try and get something done here. Because nothing's moved for a long while. I'm frustrated, others are frustrated, but I just think we need to put some particular pressure on. And now that the Settlement Trust is settled and you've got Tamatea well organised, it might be time to sort of go, with Uncle Roger at the lead, move forward.
Yes, absolutely. And I guess which leads on to one of our other topics is, so in Tamatea, we have just recently formed Te Manataia o Tamatea.
Yep.
So it's in its infancy currently, and we have shoulder tapped, and we've been very fortunate to find, if you dig a bit deep, you can find our whānau members that have got environmental science backgrounds and environmental management backgrounds. So we've pulled a rōpū together, that whakapapa to tamatea, and obviously clearly Lake Whātuma will be one of those projects that we will be able to sink our teeth into and get the ball rolling as such. So
Be careful, regional council might steal your staff.
No, we're not doing that. No, that's very good. No, that's very pleasing.
Yes, so we've been really fortunate, and we're really we're chomping at the bit, I guess, to get started, our rōpū, to get started, to put some eyes across the environment in tamatea, and obviously Roger's now, he's very pleased that he's now got some backup support, so he's not left to do it on his own. So now we've got a rōpū of environmentalists that can assist with projects in tamatea.
Hana wai?
Kia ora. Just congratulations for setting up the Tai Ao Rōpū, as well as bringing the concept to this stage. And may I suggest, because you're socialising it with HBRC now through the Māori Kapai, that possibly Pere and maybe Ian, because as Rick said, there is some hotspot funding for Whātuma, but not sure where that is. That possibly Ian and Pere engage with the right person, maybe Uncle Roger, to be able to look at how our contribution could look when and where and how, depending on what mana whenua want to do in the journey they're going on. Kapai?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, clearly forming partnerships, once we transition to the next stage is key to making it work.
Peter, you got a
Yeah,
question?
just one other thing, just to add, and I suppose I was down in Central Hawke's Bay with Toro, and I was mentioned to you earlier, looking at the longest place name and supporting Hawke's Bay Māori Tourism is going to support their business initiative, and then the same would apply for yourselves, would be able to come in there and give you some support and maybe some resourcing there. So, in regard to the tourism, the concept, I'm happy to put some, or have a discussion to look at what resourcing and that we can provide for your project.
So today was really about socialisation of the project.
Ian, did I see your hand up?
Morena koutou committee. Thank you, Chair. Yes, certainly got my hand up. Hey, fantastic to see the work that's happening down there. Just a heads up for you all that we are very, very closely connected to this mahi with Roger and his team, have been for some time. And intend to continue to be so. We've recently supported Roger in funding some work down there using the hotspot funding. We're now calling it our protection and enhancement funding.
Roger,
And Thomas.
what about us?
Can I ask those online, if you're not speaking, please to mute your mics?
Thomas Wilding is the key contact there for us. So yes, we're very excited about this and very, very happy to be supporting and partnering in the restoration work down there. So just thought you might not want to know that. Thank you.
Pere, did you have a?
Well, probably I was just going to reiterate or endorse what Ian has said. So Māori Partnerships is pleased to be alongside our ICM group in terms of Whātuma. It's exciting.
Kia ora. Tamatea, thank you very much. Ahuriri?
We're just going to give a verbal report, and sorry, Annalie, we didn't put in a report because the board hasn't actually met because of COVID. We've been unable to meet, but we've got a meeting coming up. But just we have confirmed our appointments within this. So Api, Rose and myself was confirmed on the board because we went through reappointments on different boards we all sit on. And so I just want to confirm that there, and you'll get a letter in writing from the Te Whanganui Roto just confirming our seats on this board while it's still operational. And hence, just so there's obviously business as usual for Te Whanganui Roto. We've got Jobs for Nature, we've got the Food Hub, we've got a lot of we've got the vaccination centre happening at Pakinsay. So we're doing business as usual for a lot of work, but sorry, the board just hasn't met, and potentially they'll meet another 2 weeks, just to update everyone just where we're currently at. Api, did you want to add anything? So, yeah, next time we'd mostly put nil report or 3 points. Mauri ora.
Pere.
Tēnei te mihi kia kōrua, kia koutou, because you've also been very active in terms of the food parcel deliveries that have been, looking after people's welfare. Tēnā koutou.
Thank you.
So congratulations to the three of these. And as you say, we'll soon see where the future takes this committee. And knowing that Ahuriri have already determined their mandate members to continue in the roles, that's koutou pai kia ora. Mi kia koutou. Māori, can we come to go to Heratanga?
Kia ora, Mr. Chairman, ngā mihi ati ki a koe api kia tiwharai, kia mihi ngā mihi ki ngā tini mati aitua, i roto i te mboti nei, i roto i te takiwā Ngāti Kahungunu. It's good to see everybody here, albeit being online. As we would probably be all under the pump, on top of business as usual. My apology to Anna Lee last week was just those sorts of circumstances, and it's just been, as it's been iterated, with our whānau and whanganui Arotu, having to, amongst other things, work through, particularly for our Typhoon, the welfare hub, which come right on top of the PPE, the vaccination, and of course we'll be rolling out the immunisation vaccine. So boy, if you were looking at being under the pump, and we had to redeploy staff, so over the past 2-3 weeks, my staff was small in size, the whole four of us, and so two having to go over meant that 50% of our capacity had to be taken there. And look, no hesitations whatsoever when you start to look at the contribution of the welfare hub. Something like 16 to 18,000 whānau family food boxes have gone out over the last 3 or 4 weeks. Pleasing to hear from my team this morning, the numbers in Hawke's Bay DHB are starting to show a little decline, albeit it's about 802. For Heratanga, those cases amount to about 250. So being a service provider on top of being, the eagle watching over our environment has come under some pressure. Anyway, I'll move on. So in that time, I want to just report that Typhoon to Manaki Taiao was successful in a funding application to the Ministry for the Environment, Te Manoa Te Wai Fund, and gained 3 years of funding support. So that's really great for us to complete the mahi within the Tuki catchment associated with Ngā Pou Matara House. So that'd be something for you, Ian, to say in this journey, and an acknowledgement, of course, to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and coming with us over, I think, 2 years of shared funding in order to get us to this position. And it's to enable us to identify enable the identification of hapu selected tohu for monitoring within the 3 different sections of the Tuki Awa, to research, define and prescribe the protocols and consistent methods for monitoring these tohu, including what aspects to monitor, the appropriate time to monitor them, and along with the frequency of the COP for monitoring, and prescribe how that data will be recorded and assessed, and how access permissions and the use of the data should occur, notwithstanding, of course, our contribution towards the state of the environment monitoring process undertaken, of course, by our Hawke's Bay Regional Council. We did have our first wānanga in amongst business as usual with COVID restrictions. So new way of doing things online. Our first wānanga was held on the 9th and 10th of March this year. We had about 12 of our tangata whenua that attended and contributed to the kōrero. We are now organising our second wānanga to take place with the Lower Tuki, which is confirmed for next Wednesday and Thursday of next week. So, I've had a number of clashes on our busy calendars. For instance, the governance, hui and so forth, having these clashes going on at the same time. What else can I say? I'll probably just leave that one there. I just want to report to as well that as part of the Ngāti Kahungunu iwi resilience and sustainability strategy that has been implemented over the past 12 months, and of course here again this has run right into the COVID restrictions that have been taking place, but most of the tai whenua, or in fact all of the tai whenua have been supported financially to undertake their internal forensics around what emergency response will mean, and more importantly work with our marae and hapu in terms of building their sustainability and resilience and coping with that. Of course, along with civil defence, CDEM and all of those other conduits that enable a community in the hope and the desire, of course, to have a far better response when these sorts of emergencies. And of course, you look at the breadth and scope of what emergencies there are, and of course, look no further, just looking at some of the shots of our whānau, particularly up in Wairoa and of course up in Tairāwhiti. These major events are happening, the frequency are happening more often, and our preparedness around that. And it's funny, I was up and just looking at some of those images, Michelle, and the extent of the depth and of course the rise by which floodwater, it's really threatening. So for our part, we have socialised a draft Hiratonga plan, and we've only just started to workshop through those emergency plans with our marae and hapu. That commenced last week by going online, 2 evening sessions. I think we've got about 15 participants over the spread of all of our marae that have come on and been actively engaged in terms of the draft plan. The intent here is now to take it down to each of our marae, and so that they are able to cobble together, with our support, a framework of emergency response sustainability for our marae hapu communities. If I could just move on to the next one. Of course, we've been involved in these reports that will follow on our agenda, Mr. Chairman, and we're currently engaged, we're party to the mediation of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council outstanding water body PC7. Probably just to say that we're engaged in there. That's currently going on as we speak right now. And also, we're also party to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council Global Consent caucusing hui, which I'm happy to say that we are now moving through. I think steps ahead. I think, and of course, all will be known in the next month or two in terms of hopefully our arrival into that space with agreement. I think that's probably me for the moment, Mr. Chairman, and yep, I think so. I mean, apart from there's a lot of, the Hawke's Bay Hastings District Council Global Stormwater reconsenting, and so we've been party to the applicant, the Hastings District Council, in providing the Hastings District Council, and albeit that we're, like everything else that's impacting on us in terms of the quality of time and everything else that's going on throughout the whole of the district, these sorts of processes can actually be thwarted by constraints, delays, etc. However, we were able to complete a cultural aspirations assessment report, and that's gone through our te runanga nui o ngā marae hapu. However, there was a late report that came through, a 150-page report 2 days out from the deadline, that we have got some further discussions this coming Friday. So that's my report, Mr. Chairman. We're all busy under the pump, but still able to keep on top of, I hope, what we call business as usual. Kia ora.
Thank you, Māori. Were there any questions for Māori?
I just have one. it's just in regards to, it's interesting to hear about your CDM and your emergency planning, Mare, and that's awesome. I know we'll no doubt bring that up with Te Whanganui-a-Roto, and as an example for Mōtio, we've set up a emergency site, or we're doing that at the marae, and the example was when we had the flooding, and I think one of the board members for Te Whanganui-a-Roto was Mariwa, and she talked about going out to Marae Nui and having to push a surfboard down and put rangatahi on it when they were evacuating people out when we had that. So, you know, that was a live example about our whānau put in situations to deal with emergencies and not properly equipped. So we've just started on that hikoi to say, hey, when our whānau go out to rescue their whānau or help them, that we've got some, I suppose, some tools in the kitty at the marae that we can say, hey, here's some wet weather gear, here's a walkie-talkie for communication. So we're just embarking on that hikoi now, and we've designated we've got a container, and we're going to, a third of that's been designated as emergency response centre, where whānau can come and get that wet weather gear, those emergency supplies to keep them safe. So awesome what you're doing. And then Rosie was just saying with Te Whanganui-a-Roto, we'll go down that. Obviously our individual maraes are doing work plans, but you know, and then potentially try and link in with CEDM as well. I think Rick's he might be the chair of CEDM, so it'd be interesting to have that conversation and take that a bit further. So mahi, good mahi, and we'll do that at Te Whanganui-a-Roto, and we might learn off your learnings.
With each other, yeah.
Kia ora e te whanaunga, Mare. Hey, it's great to hear that the global consent is heading in a positive direction with your next hui. Could you just let us know what are some of the sort of the main issues, or what you can share with us, some of the main issues up for sort of resolution are?
Well, there's, you can imagine, well, we're actually going through that process with another caucusing, but I think what it really highlights for me is there was a very clear direction, as you may recall or may not recall, Council, which was set out by the panel on the 10th of December, just prior to finishing the year. And we had to look at a new set of conditions, taking into account the matters of the panel raised during the hearing, of course, and including the proposed management plan details with defined objectives and requirements to be included in the revised conditions. So quite a bit of that management plan and defined objectives was missing. And so we were, I guess the other thing too, you know, in hindsight, there wasn't a control impact assessment done overall, which could have picked up on these particular matters. And another really important, I think, part or involvement is to have an independent facilitator. As we have found that part of council, you know, the recruitment of consultants, where one will end up in Auckland, one will end up in Taupo. There's a, well, from my perspective, a disconnection in terms of the real things that are really of concern for us in terms of the management program, particularly the gravel extraction. This was all brought to our notice, unfortunately, through a site extraction that we took some imagery of. I was just thinking, geez, just might share, if I can share the screen. Just give me a moment and I'll just show you some of the, well, I hope I can do this, about. Let's have a look at this. Just bear with me. I guess that really underpinned the main way by which best management processes. Here we go. Okay, can you share screen? Can you see that? Does it come up?
No,
sorry,
not yet.
No,
oh man! Oh shit! Here we go. Push the share button. Can you see it now?
Aye.
You can. Okay, so you know, I mean, you've just got to look at this picture on your on the right side of the frame, which shows the extent. This is behind Roy's Hill, and that's the main stem on one side. But the depth of extraction, you can see the extent of depth that's gone right down into clay and subsurface shingle, which we think was just totally abhorrent. Just a minute, and of course, in the bottom left-hand corner, geez, which isn't a very good image. I see it's been split now. I don't know what happened there. The length and degree of that extraction based on, of course, these gravel extraction site plans. This just demonstrates that that wasn't good practice, and of course, council said that they weren't aware of who that particular operator is. Well, didn't have to look too far. They're actually down the road here called Hawke. So, look, I'd like to think that anyway that we're able to move a little bit closer with more detail around a management plan, as I've just stated. Where you know, and I think just as another heads up, whilst we made submission, geez, this is going back about 2 or 3 years to the process, we did highlight, using terms like kaitiaki liaison groups we formed to monitor. It's funny, but I've kind of got to work with how our definitions and use of our definitions and meaning actually are not appropriate, and so I'd rather refer to those that we would like to be part of this monitoring of our waterways as just kaimahi, so tangata whenua liaison group notion of working with our whānau. And of course allowing our whānau the ability to actively, and I'm talking about our marae and hapu, as we know, and in the roles that I convey, and fully participate the involvement of our marae and hapu, that they are the mana at the end of the day. That processes like this, are on a almost a jump on the train, and you've got to keep up. And of course, nothing worse when a person like ourselves and yourselves also, committee members, have to take this conversation and its complexity back to the whānau to numb it down. And it's those within those time constraints that make things really difficult to actually get sign off. But as I said, anyway, there's a number of issues that we've been able to sign off on. We're going into, I think, our next caucus meeting next week or the week after. And there's been a huge difference by actually bringing an independent facilitator into the process. Things have moved along. So that's been a really significant shift.
Thanks for that, Mare. Rick, did you have a question? Did you want to comment? Mare, thank you very much for your report. And thank you everyone to the panel. Is anyone online who had a question?
Aroha mai, Mr. Chair. One thing, thank you, Mane, talking about your draft Hinatanga emergency plan. Yeah, I know that the council here work with certain marae in the districts, but most especially places like Tāki Timu marae can take a large capacity when the river gets too high. There's an evacuation centre, and there needs to be some more support around that, because I hear the karanga of our whānau when it comes to that. I remember Cyclone Bowler. I think they took the mattresses out of, the Taiho marae, Tāki Timu, and they stayed up in the freezing works, the bloody navi. The other thing is too, aroha mai, with the, you missed Katarina, she might have something to add, but I just need to also, I forgot about this part, we had a bit of an issue with some of the civil defence in our wider area. Most especially our whānau and our farmers up in the inland areas like Te Rangiruakaturi. So one incident that happened is the farmers had to open a road themselves. They used the fire truck that's up there to transport a patient from across the slip and into a private vehicle to go back towards Ohuka to meet up with the ambulance. Coming up the Lake Road last Saturday. So they were really isolated. Luckily, farmers are quite resilient. They have their own generators and things like that, but they had to find their own way to get a sick person out. And that was something they were really worried. Some farmers flew in their own supplies with a helicopter. One had to fly himself out. They were paying for these things themselves because they weren't hear anything because, well, I think we had 23 roads that were closed at one time here. So there was that issue too, but there were flaws in the civil defence, support, most especially for our isolated rural communities, our farmers. So that's coming from a farmer. So,
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Thank you for that, Michelle.
And Katarina, she was.
Katarina, did you have something you needed to say?
I just want to give you a quick update on Wairo Taiwhenua.
Ka
So the Wairo Taiwhenua met, we had our board meeting last week. We've been hosting the Wairo Food Bank and been meeting with MSD. We have, just a moment. Also been hooing with the Wairo police around safer communities. We're finding that the Mongol mob and other gangs.
You are breaking up.
There's a lot of conflict in town. That's all I can say. So it's like the Taiwhenua. Oh, sorry about that. How's that? Is that better?
Carry on.
Is that better?
Carry on.
Okay, and also, thank you. The community, Whitehall Community Partnership Group.
Sorry, Katarina, we keep losing you. You keep ducking in and out. Can we come back to this?
Meeting with MSD, hosting housing hui. Yes.
Yeah. We keep losing you at vital times.
I think there's a reason why we're going to have to go back to proper meetings.
So aroha mai for that. Katarina, aroha mai, you keep cutting in and out, Katarina.
Oh, sorry about that. I guess
Can we come back to it?
I'll just.
Can we come back to your report?
I can flick it to Annabelle.
Yes, please. Please do that.
And just one more thing, just on the Taiao front, is that we have a Taiao committee in Wairoa. It's all the kahui have come together and we meet monthly. We're meeting in 2 days' time and I'll give you an update in the next report about that. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora Katarina.
Can I just respond briefly to a point that Michelle made about the seeming failures of civil defence? Having been in this game, I don't want to say this to contradict her at all, but I do want to put on the table that one of the problems we face in these emergencies is that things are broken, things don't work. And you can't expect a normal service delivery when things are broken and not working. So it does behove us all to sort of build in a resilience. And I just think that as a country and as a region, we're going to face more severe weather events in the future, and resilience is going to be the key issue for us to focus on. We're going to have options that will work in a case where things break down. I just want to say that just cannot expect things to work normally in an emergency, in a significant event. It just happens.
Thank you for that. Can I have a move and a second for the reports, please? Thank you, Api, and thank you, Peter. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Carried. Moving along to item 7, follow-ups. Who's doing this?
Oh, I don't know. I think we'll take it as read.
We'll take it as read?
Yep.
Okay.
If you got the chair and chief executive's updates.
So we'll take item 7 as read. Moving to item 8, calls for minor items. Katarina?
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry.
6, item 6.
Sorry, it's item 6. Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman.
I'd like to report on behalf of the chief executive. A couple of points. I'll be pretty brief. Firstly, I'd like to say that the regional council is under pressure. Pressure from several different aspects. Firstly, one more concerning for us all is the turnover in staff. Like a number of other organisations, we've suffered a turnover in staff, and it's been challenging to recruit new people. We've had a long period where things have been stable. Secondly, but more expectedly in the current circumstances, we've got a number of staff who are off, like our Chief Executive, for COVID, and so we're down with COVID as well. On the other side, we've had an increase in workload and effort required because of floods and rains and things like that. So what should be hopefully going up is going the other way, and what should be going down is going up. And in addition to that, we're suffering inflationary pressures, and we've got some pressures on the finances. So it's a bit of a stressful time at the moment. But having said that, the organisation is coping incredibly well, and I'm very pleased with the outstanding effort of the staff. Its leadership and the management on all fronts is doing a great job. Turning to the matter of the governance committee, we met as a governance team a wee while ago, and to put no small spin on it, didn't go as well as I had hoped. I want to start from the big picture that we've been looking at, trying to get this new governance arrangement running now for 6 months, with the aim of having the Kotahi plan finished by 2024. 6 months has rolled by, and it would be difficult for people to see that we've made any major progress here. We're still thinking and still working and still consulting and still inquiring and doing that. Well, we can't stay in this thinking, consulting, moving about space. We've got an enormous amount of work to do, and we need to get a place where we can move forward. So that's the first point. The second thing is that I realised I personally made a mistake on the day. Had a Zoom call with the Minister of Civil Defence, which I was keen to attend. Who was supposed to have finished well in time for me to be able to attend the Zoom call. It did not. Yet I made a choice to go and meet with the Minister of Civil Defence on Zoom with the Chief Executive. It's a choice I won't make again, but that's that. The second thing I felt we were a little remiss in was I don't think we got the agenda right for the day. And so I think we need to do a lot more planning and apply the 7 Ps, the prior planning and preparation, to prevent a poor performance. We need to pick up on this. The third thing is I feel that we didn't engage the leadership of the councillors, the leadership of the Māori committee and the leadership of the RPC in planning and developing the agenda. I just think that people turned up, as I did, not as well informed as I'd have liked. I had great faith in the people who were leading the thing, but I wasn't quite sure on the pathway forward, and it didn't work out. So I'm suggesting to the co-chairs of the committee here and the RPC and the chair and deputy chair of the council, we have a meeting to review how the co-governance session went, and to look at developing the agendas on the way forward. I think if we're going to make this work, we all have to be on the same team, very clear about what it is, and to work in a much better coordinated way. So we'll have that for the next meeting. So other great things have happened here. We're going to hear from our climate change ambassador shortly. This is an important step. I would have liked to have seen more staff and more resources in this area, but it is what we've got. The individual has got, in my view, an enormous task, well beyond their single effort to be able to create a change in this. So we're all going to have to pack around it like a scrum going forward, and drive this thing across the line. It's not going to be a single person's job. We can't just simply say, because we've got a climate change ambassador, it's all over to them now. Shunk, here's the ball, you do it all the work. We're all going to have to be part of this. That there's no doubt. We have the council has approved the coastal hazards policy. I'm very pleased about this. It's got to the stage where it's going to go out to consultation, and the public are going to make their own mind. But it's interesting that we, to date, have had 3 councils involved in the Tangoio to kidnappers. The district councils, Napier and Hastings, and the regional council. And on occasions, the policies of each of the councils is different from the other, and there's been quite a lot of confusion at the interface, who's doing what with whom and how. What we've done now is decide that all of this, for the same set of ratepayers, will be handled by an individual council, and that'll be the regional council. So your workload is going to go up. The last thing I'd make is that with the enormous amount of wet weather, it's pleasing to see that our infrastructure is held up. This is sort of like a warning sign in my view, but we need to be really vigilant. We need to make sure that we're strengthening our assets, make sure the maintenance is done, that culverts are clean, things are done. We cannot afford to let this thing slide, because the next event could be more significantly bigger, and we could be in trouble unless we do our work. We had a warning with Napier recently, a warning with coastal storm went along the southern coast. We've had an enormous amount of rain in Wairoa. We haven't lost any life, we haven't lost anything major, but we've come close, so we need to be careful. That's about it, I think.
Ka pai, were any questions for Rick in both of those reports?
Because Rick talked about the corporate and governance structure. I said on that committee I was going to give him, but he's summed up our hui that I attended, so I won't fully report on that governance strategic team. But what I will say in regards to that Kotahi plan in relation to, because I think at the hui, and Rick, you may not have been there, because obviously we, for Te Whanganui and I think Mangaruru said as well, that if we're going to embark on those workshops, we need to go back and discuss that with our board prior to having those hui, because we need to know what the focus is on those hui. So we didn't agree until we took it back to the board, which we've got a board meeting coming up, because they talked about wānanga hui, taking that out to the marae and to the community, but we just needed to have that discussion in regards to around the purpose and what do we want to get out of those meetings. So hence, when we have our board meeting, then we said we'd come back to the committee and advise where we're going to move from there. So just following on your point when you said about those hui and then our objective and the purpose of attending these hui and what we're going to get out of them, what we need to feed back to our board and where we're going from there. Because I got lost in a couple of little things and I wasn't too sure, and I don't think we were able to at that time up here totally agree on taking that out for wānanga at all our marae.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I just, on a slightly different thing, I mean, if we're going to have to go through quite a lot of consultation and discussion about consulting, well, then this is going to be a long process because this isn't actually a big issue. What we're looking at here, the objective here is to have a plan, and by plan, I mean a set of rules for managing the environment for the whole of Hawke Bay. That's what this is. That's going to be an enormous job. So if we want to solve the problem of water flow, we want to solve the problem of protecting our water, so all of those things will come out of those plans because they will set the rules. And this is supposed to be done by 2024 for the whole of Hawke's Bay. This is an enormous job. And the point of this is we need to talk to people about it so that we get them to go, well, this is what we're here to do, without actually making any decisions. So I'm just cautioning you here, the rate of progress, I'm saying from the person looking at it to the end point of 2024, what we've done is concerning. I just don't think we're making the rate of progress we do. Before I give up the floor, can I just make one other point I meant to do. The council, in its wisdom, has decided to shift some of its committee meetings to the other areas to build on relationships that it has. We do nearly all of our work in this room here, and the first of that's going to be Hiniwai taking the Environment and Integrated Catchments Committee to Wairoa. We'd like to be there for 2 days to do some work, to see some people, see some projects, and then to have our meet with people that evening, and also then to have our meeting the following day. We'll use the Wairoa Council Chambers pretty full wide. And the next one we've got on the list is to go to Tamatea again, to build our relationships and strengthen things and to go and see things jointly and look at what the issues are, and so we have a shared vision.
Kia ora. It's just before we move on, just in regards to the Kotahi plan, we understand the position of Hawke's Bay Regional Council and wanting to bring all of their planning underneath the one korowai. In regards to the joint governance, one thing I did take out of our joint governance hui was it actually identified the gaps that actually do exist not only between mana whenua and council, but with the mana whenua ourselves. So we heard there from Peter, from his comments in regards to there still has to be conversations that we need to undertake at the home front, as well as the wider Māori community, and in some places across tai whenua. So these are not simple conversations. This is like a whole governance, different approach. If this was mainstream, you would have exactly those same difficulties trying to navigate your way across multiple council bodies, which you do have when you don't agree with each other. So we're no different. We've got to be given the time to do that. We do need to continue to keep on conversing with each other to help us understand what the issues are and to stay focused. I have asked numerous times that council be patient and allow us to have our conversations. I'm sorry we not quite in step with our time frames, but we will get there in the end. We'll all meet up at the same place where we're supposed to be meeting. It just may take us a bit longer to get there. Is that helpful?
Yes, it is helpful. I not very often that I am impatient, but on this particular one, I am impatient. I'm sorry, but you just have to bear with me on that.
Hey, Mr. Chair, could I...
I'll just go over here. I'll just come over here, then I'll come back up to the board.
Kia ora, Chair. Hey, and just to tautoko what Rick has said about our business as usual is quite an agile business as usual at the moment. And it's really testing our resilience as an organisation around what priorities matter most when it comes to an emergency situation. The second thing I think with our last governance hui was that more information was needed for our representatives to take back to their boards. So I just really encourage whatever that looks like, that you ask our appropriate staff for that information so you're ready to take it back to your respective boards. And then what I found from our last all governance hui is, and the gap maybe, is we need a bit more order and structure, possibly for the next all governors hui, to say actually what may it look like for our next steps, because that's where I found it lacking last hui. But that was just my view. And just the last thing is that yes, we'd like to go to the reaches of our rohe, which is why the EICC huis are going to be one day, have our hui at the chambers, Wairoa District and Central Hawke's Bay. And we'll do the field trips the other day. On projects mainly that come through EICC, so community projects, planting projects, stability of our banks, and also any other economic development work that's going on for our mana whenua groups as well. So Ian is in charge of getting those agendas together. So if you do have a project, so I'm thinking, Michelle, when we come up to Wairoa, please just let me know if there's something that you'd like us to come and see, given we've only got a whole day of a whole lot of mahi that we want to see in Wairoa. But if you do have an idea with that, can you please let me know and I can help coordinate. Kia ora.
So was that you, Charles?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Just listening to the reports back about the emergency in the last couple of weeks. It was a civil defence emergency and everything but name. And being a marae worker myself over the years, I know that over the last 25 years, every council is, our council anyway, has rolled out 3 or 4 different methods of looking after yourself in a disaster. They come up with marae plans and things, and they have a civil defence coordinator. But I've never actually noticed one actually do a consultation afterwards. So there's any review on processes and things. And just listening to what's been going on recently on our one, we've set up the Rural Advisory Group, which is really out there for the farming community and the outlying communities. But they don't actually talk to the maraes or and I noticed the Māori incorporations who own quite a lot of land. You use Hilton Collier, which is fine, but Hilton doesn't actually advise all the Māori incorporations. Pahuera ourselves own quite a bit of land, and Hilton's not advising us either. So the point is, I think when we do the wrap up and the investigation on how our services held up, we need to get the conversation from everybody, and those people that are community liaisons probably need to, I would suggest, put out a survey on, how people thought it went. If you ask them for comments, sometimes you probably won't get much back, but if we have a little survey out to everybody, then you'll have a common theme going through everything. And building up a picture. We don't actually have to have a picture of how the marae's fared in any of the last weather events. And they really are our outlying communities. So, thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Charles. Was anyone else on screen?
Yeah, thanks. Kia ora, Charlie, tautoko was a review, most especially with our, as I understand, over 60% of the farming land here, the whenua here is owned by Māori, Māori corporations, and our marae are always there to support our community when in need. So yeah, there needs to be a review on that, and most especially I think there needs to be some, go into the Mangapuiki area, go into the Ruakaturi, Tauranga area and talk and have a hui with those farmers and see how they fared. The other thing is just a comment on the governor's hui and the Kotahi plan. I did speak about it the other day around constitutional transformation and Mātiki Mai Aotearoa, which is a report that was done by Professor Margaret Mutu and the late Dr. Moana Jackson, and that's where we should be heading when I'm talking about Kotahi. One of the things I want to point out is the tile unit that we requested. That's about the equity we need as Māori. We need to have our advisors, independent advisors, and if that's going to take a long time to produce while we're going through the Kotahi plan, then we need to bring in advisors. And I'm speaking of people like Mare and Mare, you're already in there, but to be on that working group, and Naio Tuaka, Shade Smith. These are the only people we've got to go to help us in the meantime. These are our experts, and they're in Niki and Heretanga Tai Whenua. But there needs to be some equity if we need to move a bit quicker. The Tile Committee can be developed simultaneously to the Kotahi plan. But we need our advisors next to us. We sit there, and I've been told it's the governance circle. Well, it's the governance circle that has operations, Hawke's Regional Council operations sitting in it. So why can't we have our tangata whenua operation people sitting with us, advising us on what this is? So could I just like to pop that there as something to consider.
Kia ora. Thank you, Michelle. Pere?
Kia ora tātou. I think the hui that you referenced earlier this week, Michelle, we had two critical people missing from that hui. That was our Chair, Rick Barker, and our Deputy Chair, Will Foley. So just for your diaries and for your schedules, the next schedule all of governors Kotahi hui is on the 13th of April. And we're utilising what was the Regional Planning Committee Day, for which there wasn't an agenda. So that's 13th of April, 1:30 through until 4 p.m, when we'll be able to actually consolidate the discussions that we've been having thus far, as Rick has indicated earlier on.
So is that an open hui for all of us to attend, or is it closed?
There'll be a discussion this afternoon, 2:30, with the co-chairs, who will be looking at the agenda to actually set that up for the 13th.
So through you again, Mr. Chair, can I ask our Māori committee that are present, would you be supportive of having Māori, you maybe don't know you're busy man, but really would appreciate it if you're partaking in that workshop next week. And you know, are we going to support someone like Niall coming in to advise us and assist us? From our Māori community, I just want to know what the gauge is.
So can we go back to your question, please, Peter? I just missed your question.
It was around whether he was open to all board members or not, or was it closed to specific members? I don't.
So can we have some clarity around that, please?
So the all of governors who are planned for the 13th will be all of the Māori committee, all of the regional planning committee, and our elected councillors. Just responding back to your partai, Michelle, I think if we wait for the co-chairs chairs discussion this afternoon, because one of the greatest objectives that we have, as Rick has indicated, is about actually seeing how we work together as governors. We need to get that right first.
But you have the regional council operations people sitting in the hui with us. So what's the difference? That's what my kōrero is about. Why can't we have our advisors? Tautoko whānau?
So one of them for me, Michelle, is that 13th is around governance. It's about establishing a co-governance group. If there's a tie-out...
Operations sit in those hui.
Can I finish, please? Our tie-out group that we are hoping to establish, who we have on that, I would hope would be our business.
And who sits in the hui with us, with the governors? Operations.
So when we have our...
What's the difference with not having, with having some type
when
of
we have,
operations there helping us?
When we have our hui...
What's the difference?
When we have our hui this afternoon, and if that's where we land, then that's where we'll land, and then we'll get the appropriate assistance in to help us with those conversations.
Well, my co-chair, I'm asking our committee, who we represent.
Committee, please.
What do you say, committee? I want to hear what the committee got to say.
What I'd say for myself would be just having the right, like advice, because for us to make decisions, it's like anything, you just have to have the right advice, and you've got to have confidence, and not saying anything negative about regional council staff or anything. All I'm saying is if we're looking for a Māori lens and we're talking about mātauranga Māori, sometimes it's not advisable to put regional council staff under pressure to deliver on something they may not know enough about. And then if we've got someone that's that's what they do in their mahi, I'd support what Michelle's saying, because then it gives a different viewpoint or lens, and when you go for university and you study certain aspects, they may have not done the mātauranga Māori, and to put them in a position where they're trying to comment on something they may have only done a short little paper on, it creates pressure for staff. So all I'm saying, based on what Michelle I think is saying, is if we have a independent view, and as a governor for myself making a decision, if I'm not an expert in that area, especially on the mātauranga stuff in kawa, and then I've got someone that's worked in that space giving us advice, it makes it easier for us to make a decision. So I think that's what...
So it's expertise around that governance space?
It's around, say it might be around whether it's water, whatever it is, and then we're getting an independent view.
Can I have some clarification? Is the conversation on the 13th around the co-governance space or the kotahi plan?
Well, the conversation on 13th is about the co-governance, is to get the governance right. What we then have is governance is supported by operational advice. Can I just come back to the point that has been raised by Michelle? Let's start from the beginning. We cannot set up a TIO committee overnight. There's just not the time, not the people. The people aren't available.
Can I just stop you there? It's not about you setting up a TIO committee.
No,
it's about us and establishing what we want.
I'm just trying to get that.
I think that's important, that there's clear definition here that we're not asking council to set up a TIO subcommittee for mana whenua.
No, sorry, exactly.
That is our discussion. That is for us to decide.
Sorry, I didn't mean it to imply that, but I'm just going to just back up the truck. Council is going to support its co-governors in any particular way it can. You have suggested that setting up a TIO committee is a good way forward, and I acknowledge that that's an appropriate and a sensible thing to do. But it's not something that, in my estimation, simply no one else has said to me, that's going to happen immediately. So what we have to do is we have to find a way in which we can enable space and time for the setting up of a TIO committee. and space and time to and support with technical advice for governance, co-governance at the same time. So there needs to be two processes working here. And I've said at the meeting the other day that the council is committed to making resources available. What they are is firstly not unlimited, but we'll do our very best. So we're going to put our best foot forward on this. So we need to have some advice on how it works. So that's where we sit with that. So we're here to help. We haven't determined how that's going to phrase, and people haven't told us how it's going to work, but we've just got to work this thing out. Rather than leap to conclusions, let's leap to identify objectives and work out how we get there.
And so, Petty, so I believe that our conversation this afternoon is around setting what that agenda is.
Yeah.
And if it's around the co-governance space, then it's co-governance.
Yeah.
It's not around the actual delivery of the plan.
No.
So it's, because that's what happened at our, I would say, from our last one, we had too many take on that table and confusion set in.
I agree with that.
If we need expert advice, and this is where I agree with Michelle, if we need expert advice, if we feel we need expert advice in that particular take around setting up that co-governance space, we should get the appropriate expertise help. That's different from setting up the TIL space, because once again, it's a different set of skill sets.
Exactly.
And if we are going to be asked to actually comment, which is where I think Michelle is going on this, if we're going to be asked to comment and engage with the kotahi plan, then we also need appropriate skill sets that actually help support us in that space. So it's not getting all of these kaupapa and dumping them all on one and dumping them on the table and think we're going to make progress on it, because we're not. That's where we keep falling down. There's too many take landing on the table. Is that a fair summary?
Yep.
Yeah, so it's about the tile unit is going to take time, and we came to that conclusion when we had our hui. Well, it was a whakamenenga, wasn't it? It was a meeting of the RPC and the Māori committee about the kaupapa was the tile. So and the policies around that. So that's, I agree, that's going to take maybe a couple of years. But there are models out there in the country like Mahanu Kura Tile and Otautahi. There's some in parts of the North Island as well. But, it's about, I'm feeling that we need like our advisors, like we all have our own mātauranga, and Mare is an expert talking in his own right too, but it's like bringing in the best with us and having those advisors sitting next to us as governors and going, well, what do you think of this? What's your advice on this? We don't have those people that we want to see our faces. We want to talk to our people and our scientists who have a Māori lens on this, to advise us as the governors, to assist us as the governors. And that's where I'm coming from. So we can't, with the tile unit, might take a couple of years. I want that to be happening simultaneously, but I also want to have our advisors in the room. They are advising us as governors. And these are people I trust. I trust Niall Turka and Shade Smith with the fate of our awa. That's how much I respect those things. I trust Mare Apatu. I'll listen to that man to advise us. So that's who I want to see, people we trust. So, kia ora.
Ka pai. Thank you, Michelle.
And then you feel equity, and then you feel so cool. Let's row that waka. Let's hoiara into the destination. But for that to happen, we need equity.
Ka pai. Thank you.
Just one thing to add, because there was already an example. There's already an example of Hawke Regional Council with the Moaka Plan change, where they've engaged in regards to that corridor, and they've brought in Māori expertise in regards to work with regional council. So there's already an internal structure, and I'm not saying it's a be-all end-all, but there is a process already being implemented in regards to that, as an example.
Ka pai. Any further comment?
Kia ora, Chair. Just want to revert back to your clarity earlier on that this afternoon is an agenda setting. Co-governance is number one on that. The reason for kotahi and having like Kerry and Katrina there was because there's a purpose underneath co-governance. So that was the reason for that, and also for Ricky's presence as part of that last hui that was had on the 23rd of March, Ricky Ellison.
Right, thank you. No further comment? We'll move along. Thank you very much. Minor items.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can we just move that?
Oh, can we move that, please?
Sure.
Thank you, Haniwai and Rick.
Sorry, I just had to go back to item, and we rushed through item 7, and it was around those milestones in that. And then just in regards to, it was about in progress, invite Pōratu Tapu from the Kaitiaki Board or Customary. It was in a follow-up from previous Māori committee meetings on item 7 and those follow-ups. So I just wanted to ask whether the letter had been sent to that committee or not, or do you want me to follow up, or was that coming from the regional council in regards to that? Because that goes into the corridor when we go through coastal hazards, and then when we're talking to that Ropu, I can bring it up there because that's from Mahi right down to Wairarapa, and then we're talking about coastal hazards strategy, and then where's the involvement if we haven't sent the letter advising for someone to come to that hui.
My apology, I must have missed the follow-ups when I was absent. So I have spoken to Paul, and we've set him up for the 8th of June, which is the next Māori committee. If we recall, the ignition point was that was from Paora Shasha and from the Typhoon report, Tamatea, and that was what he described, my words, as the devastation of their kaimona over that Christmas New Year period. So Paul will be here on the 8th of June, might be online, in terms of advising how the Kaitiaki board works for them.
Thank you. Thank you. So all those in favour of item 6, so it's been moved and seconded, which is the current of issues report given to us by our chair, Rick Maka. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Carried. Call for minor items. Katalina, you had one. Katalina?
Yes. Tai Ao committee has met in Wairoa, and I took some concerns to the Tai Whenua regarding 3 marae that do not receive water from the town supply, but they are on the Waio. You know, the sister marae is on the Waio. One of them's Rangiahua, the other one's Arimafa, and the other one is Ramoto.
Can we say that for your actual minor items report? Just the take, please. So it's water, access to water?
So the take is the access to drinking water, potable water for 3 marae. But also, there's also been some kōrero and discussions around the quality of the water in Wairoa.
Thank you.
Yes, the quality of the water.
Any other minor items? Just one from me, the upcoming elections at the end, towards the end of the year there, especially in regards to Māori representation. No further minor items? Mover for the minor items, please. Thank you, Peter and Rose. Moving down to item number 9, Climate Action Ambassador.
You're blowing through it today, Chair.
Only 18 minutes behind schedule. We're getting there.
Unruly group you got here.
Mōrena koutou.
Mōrena.
Ngā mihi kia koe, Mr. Chair, ngā mihi Rick for your words earlier. Ko wai au, I te puakia hau I raro I te manga. Sorry, I'll speak louder.
Yep.
Ko wai au, I te puakia hau I raro I te manga matarua hau, I te taha o te wai o hinana, o te awa o te wai o hinana. Ko Makalvi toko ingoa whānau, he tuiwia hau. Kei o tātara a hau inoho ana, ko pepa taku ingoa. Kia ora tātou katoa. So, My name's Pippa. I grew up here in Hawke's Bay and have lived overseas for many years. That's a photo of my awa, where my family go back to, and that's probably one of the reasons why I came back here after many years. Unfortunately, after the rains 10 days ago, that swing no longer exists and the river looks very different out there right now in Eastdale. So thank you for having me here this morning to introduce myself, to meet you all, and to talk a little bit about the climate action work that I'll be undertaking. Just going to start, just using the opportunity really to start with a short coverage, short summary of this Ipcc report, the third Ipcc report that came out yesterday, New Zealand time. So some of you may have seen it on the news and in the papers over the last couple of days. This was so last year the science report came out in 1st of March, the adaptation and vulnerability report came out. This report is on mitigation. So it's really what we can do to keep our planet livable in those terms. So to keep within 1.5 degrees of warming this century, they are saying we need to halve our greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Those emissions that are rising, they're rising internationally, they're rising nationally, they're rising regionally. Our emissions are currently rising. They must peak by 2025. Or we will be hit by, and I've put these words in brackets because they're quite scary words. If we don't do these things, we'll be hit by terrifying storms, unprecedented heat waves, and widespread water shortages. Now, all of those things apply to Hawke's Bay, and as you've seen and already talked about this morning, the impact of the storms is already here for our communities and for our whānau. They have assessed, now the scientists who have written this and the governments who have signed off on these words have said that if we were to implement all of the current policies internationally that are currently in place, if we were to do it all, we would be on track for 3.2 degrees of warming. To put that in context, the last time when our climate was different by 4 degrees, it was the Ice Age. So 3.2 degrees warming is not something that we want. So rapid systemic change is needed now, and the window of opportunity for climate stability is closing fast. I know that, that's those words are really stark, but I do need to express them. There are points of positivity in the report, points of hope. I won't read through all of those, but they are showing that the acceleration in our growth of emissions is slowing, but we're still not on track, but there is a slight slowing. And these latest two reports, particularly the one that I covered at the Environment and Integrated Catchments Committee, have really recognised the need for equity in any of our responses, the need to incorporate Indigenous knowledge and local knowledge, and that we need a focus on social justice, equity and well-being. Because when we talk about storms, heat waves and water shortages, it's actually our people that suffer, our environment, but actually our people suffer too. So those are some of the things that have, and the cost of some of the solutions has massively decreased. That would be another positive from this current report. So what can we do? Well, fossil fuels need to stay in the ground. We need to reduce our emissions. We need more carbon removal techniques that can be planting trees or agricultural solutions such as soil capture. We do need to be thinking about building energy efficient houses. That's something we need to be focusing on in our work regionally. Renewable energy and a transport mode shift. As they say that transport emissions appear to be, because I'm not sure about the national situation, but internationally they are growing the fastest. Now, I've highlighted that next point because I think that that's key in our role, in your role as governors, is we need to make it easy for people to make better choices. So this is done by our policy. This is building codes, planning, carbon pricing, low carbon infrastructure, public transport, and vehicle efficiency standards. Those are some things that we can do so it's easier for our communities. At an individual level, often, well, at a household or a whānau level, food waste and consumption. I'm going to show you some later where our emissions come from, and keep in mind that a third of our food is wasted in New Zealand. So we talk about individual level actions as gateways to further action. They take people on a path where they start a mindset shift, where they value their environment, and then they may even advocate to their governors for change. So they are really important also to encourage our individual changes. And as George Monbiot says, we created these systems so we can change them. So as the climate action work that I'll be involved in and that we'll all be involved in, how can we ensure a climate resilient future for our communities in Hawke's Bay? It's going to be essential for economic resilience, but also for human well-being. We're going to need to develop common goals and narratives to enable these transformations that are necessary, and we're going to need to align all the activities of different people involved. And my role has been created as a stepping stone there, as a part of that. I just wanted to share with you, I know that the text is perhaps not easy to understand, but we have this is the best data we have at the moment on where our regional emissions come from. This comes from Stats New Zealand. You'll see it is already 3 years old, and there's a very long lag time in the release of these reports. But our Hawke's Bay emissions do come, 3/4 of them are coming from primary industries. That's agriculture, forestry, that is in essence food production, our crops and our farms. Households over here in brown are around 10%, industries around 10%. Now I showed this graph. The graph on the right there comes from a survey that the Regional Council did 2 years ago on where our communities think emissions come from. So I know it's a lot to take in, but the colours match up. So you can really see that agriculture, which is 72% of our emissions based on the stats model, comes down to our people think it's around 11% of emissions. I show that not to pick out one area, but I show it to just show that we have a job to help our people understand what's going on, where emissions are coming from, what actions will be useful, and also how to be more resilient in the face. So yeah, we have areas of the community who are very well aware of these issues, but we need to help as a Hawke's Bay community to come along in education and awareness. Oh yeah, that's just summing up the point that what our residents overestimate the share of emissions to come from. So the skeletal work plan that I put as a paper to this committee, this is just really covering it, and we'll have time to have a kōrero about those aspects. We're going to need a whole of society response that includes everyone, businesses, governance group, individuals, and we really need to have this collective action with a shared vision. 3 work streams that I've proposed are the first stream, collating and communicating what we already know and what we already do. And I guess that's where, I didn't say earlier in my pepeha, but my background has been in research. I've been at EIT in the soon-to-be Rangahau Māori Research Centre. So that's where I'll bring those skills to that work stream. The second one is gaining more comprehensive information about our regional risk and emissions. So that graph I showed you, that's already 3 years old, and it's not very fine-grained. We'll be doing some work to get more detailed information about our emissions, and then community engagement, partnerships and collaboration. And that's just the final slide, really. It's just a visual representation of this, like a roadmap. If we have committed as a council to being carbon zero in Hawke's Bay by 2050, how are we going to get there? And what are the steps that we're going to need to bring people along for this change? And what are the best forums, some of the rōpū that you've already talked about. And just to finish with a quote there from Roman Kesnarik, we've colonised the future. The choices that we've made over the last 30 years have actually determined the climate, the unstable climate that our children and our grandchildren will have. So it's time to be a good ancestor.
Sounds like a treaty. Comment. Colonisation.
So Pippa, thank you very much for that. First and foremost, how are you finding the role?
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah, I'm really so happy to be here. It seems like a perfect role. I am still studying on my PhD, which is a project called Nourishing Hawke's Bay He Wairoto Te Kai. So that's with EIT. So that's probably the challenge for me, is having 2 hats to wear and a lot to juggle. But in terms of the role, loving it, yeah.
And how are we able to engage with you as various tai whenua and from Rohi?
Invite me for a cup of tea. I think, I'd be really happy to speak with you individually. Or if you have hui happening, I'm really happy to engage with those things.
Finally from me, and it has nothing to do with your report, what benefits do you think is in the establishment of this role as a climate ambassador for mana whenua, having someone within regional council?
Look, I think that the Regional Council has done scientific monitoring of our environment really, really well for a long time. Possibly what I hope to bring to the role and what would be a benefit for mana whenua is a more of an understanding of behavioural change. And my background was in psychology before I went into research. It's more about bringing people along for change, engaging, communicating, listening, and incorporating all those different knowledges that we have available in our community. So I'm hoping that would be the benefit that you would see in this role, that I come from a very social science background, rather than the pure science, which we're already doing well and there are experts in.
Thank you, Sam. Returning back to your report, I'll open it up to the floor.
I've got a question, and it's, I suppose, before this meeting, someone asked a question, and I'm not going to refer to the example, but when you look at carbon farming, and there's a number of discussions happening now around that, when you look at the economic modelling and that and this goes across mainstream, not only Māori, but then when you look at the modelling around credits and going from beef and sheep to say carbon farming, and then the cost factors for those organisations is quite high to make the change, and they're predicting that I think sitting at $80 at the moment, it's going to go up to 150, and based on your modelling, long term, that's potentially a good investment. I'm not saying I'm supporting it, or I'm just saying as an overview, because those are some of the challenges for different Māori organisations that's before them at the moment, and then how do they work towards this. And you being an ambassador, obviously that'll be a conversation, I suppose, when you get to mana whenua and giving a perspective on that, and then looking at the question of indigenous forests, which Māori have a huge percentage of ownership within the Hawke's Bay East Coast region, and the differential between native trees and then pine trees, because you get more money for a pine tree and then for a native, but yet we've got a huge, or Māori trusts have a huge investment in indigenous forests within the East Coast region, but then they get, there's no, they don't fit into the modelling because it's not cost effective. It's better for them to cut all their native trees down and plant pine. When you look at the economic modelling, and so I just suppose that's some of the question. I'm just giving you insight in some of the frustrations that are in those different organisations, how they cope with setting up support in this carbon environment to meet the needs of their people. And just an insight, because those questions, and I don't know if you've got any answers to that.
No, thank you for that. I think the with the emissions trading scheme under review at the moment, some of those questions, they're out for consultation about whether Indigenous should be included, or if exotics should be included or excluded. So we will get clarity in the next year or so, the way that the government is pricing those things. But it is a really complex and ever-changing situation. So I understand that hapu are needing to keep up to speed with the changes there. The thing that we need to think long term though, so because if short-term planning of something that may sequester carbon now but be cut down in 50 years is not a long-term solution for our communities. And the other thing that I have heard said is, well, you can't eat trees. So trees are great to sequester carbon, but we produce food on farms because we need to eat.
And just to quantify, I was up in Puketichi over the weekend and talked to one of the local farmers up there. He doesn't mind me mentioning his name because he was Malcolm White, and he lives right on the Mohawk at the junction of the Mohawk and the Reaper River, and he said the same comment. And he it's not going towards carbon farming, but he said the same thing. Well, what about a lamb chop? You lamb chop, you can eat a lamb chop, can't eat a bit of bit of timber. Hey, so but for farmers, they're mostly looking at the cost, how do they survive through that process, say, and yeah. So I didn't, I just said, well, I don't know, but from a financial perspective, they're weighing up the options. And I don't think the Wairoa District Council, Mayor, I don't think he supports all that land being turned into carbon farming.
Yeah. No, he doesn't.
Any other questions?
Question, please? Kia ora, Papa. So my question is about, yes, no, definitely our Wairoa District Council Mayor does not support pine tree farming. Covering our stations and pine trees. I don't think that's good for the environment overall. My question to you is that, when you talk about monocultures, as opposed to native forests, and climate change, and the increase in temperatures. I was told in a climate summit in Tairāwhiti that monocultures are going to be a fire hazard. They're just standing matchsticks. And do you have any comment about that? Monocultures, I'm talking about pine trees or manuka plantations, not the normal remnant mixture you see like in Tātaro Kina.
I don't actually know the difference in fire risk between the indigenous and exotic monocultures. I know that in the second report, the adaptation report about risks and resilience, there was a separate chapter on New Zealand, and it talked about indigenous species not being able to survive fires. So they have identified that is a risk for New Zealand and loss in biodiversity because of the increased risk of fire. But I would say I think risk of fire is perhaps something we don't have on our radar as much as we do about risk of flood. But thank you for the question.
We're seeing it around the world, really, So it's something that needs to be looked at, especially where we're hearing about farms being converted to forestries.
Yeah, and as Awaroa down south at the moment with the fires on the wetlands and the I saw the iwi commenting on that about the potential loss of some of their taonga. So I think it's a new area that we need to be across a little bit better.
And I think it's in the report. In the report, it might refer to stem plantings and the distances and that, and block planting areas just solely for carbon farming because you just heavily plant, and the other constraints put on forestry companies may not be on carbon farming because I think the regulations or legislation around that is a little bit different. Because if you're going to carbon farm, you just put all those trees into that area, and you're not growing for a crop to harvest. You're growing for carbon, which is a different driver in the financial sense. If you don't need to spend money on doing this, then you won't. So I think maybe, and I think the government's looking at legislation around that. I'm not an expert, but I did read something about that.
Māori, and then I can make over to Rick.
Tēnā koe Papa, he pai e rongo au tō reo, ki matai kia koe me ki tēnā wahanga. It was heartening to just hear the start of your presentation in the reo. Sort of made that, so it's a big mihi to you. I guess one of the issues that I confront, particularly around this whole arrival where tikanga starts in a parallel dimension along to their Pākehā, and in itself are conversations that I guess that you're going to be facilitating with our marae and hapu. I was just taken by what you were saying about the attitude and behaviour, and I think it's a two-way mirror. You have to actually look at the councillors that are actually making the decisions around this. I'll give you a case in point, particularly around the outstanding water body, in terms of policies and rules and limits and standards. And so we identified 36 waterways throughout the whole of Hawke's Bay as outstanding water bodies. Hawke's Bay Regional Council received these waterways, and it only took one submitter in this process to disagree with 34 of those 36 waterways, and it just dropped off. So, when you go out and you start to talk to our people about attitude and behaviour in terms of the regulator making these particular policies, rules, which we believe are very flawed, and we can't actively participate because we're standing upon tikanga and this whole merge and discussion that's going on. But I was really heartened by what you said in terms of turning the colonial clock back. That's a big number, and we've only seen this expression demonstrated on the marae over the weekend when the nation's best orators, the nation's best people that err on the left side of the centrist view and those that err on the right centrist view were in one place going through this whole process about Māoridom, our marginalisation, whether that be in health, justice or local government. So we'll have that conversation with you, my dear. We'll invite you to our marae and hapu, but I'll have to keep an eye on you just in case my whānau start to bring up these sorts of issues. So kia ora.
Rick?
Just to respond briefly to 2 points raised. One is that about the rating given to pine trees as opposed to New Zealand native timber and so on. It's not to distinguish one against the other. It's simply that the people who measure these things looking at just the rate at which pines grow and sequestrate carbon. That's what it is. And as for pines, it's acknowledged that pines are more susceptible to burning. In fact, one of the things that they should have done in Wellington, where they had regular fires on the hills around there, was reforest it with native trees. They don't burn the same. They're very hard to set on fire. So you're quite right at that they are very durable. That's why we've got this policy of right tree, right place. In some places, we should simply just restore, put the trees there and leave them, do nothing about them, because they'll look after the land better than anything else we can do. Other places, you'll need trees for different purposes, so it's got to be a bit more subtle about how we do this, not just pines everywhere, anywhere.
Thank you, Rick. Are there any other questions for Pippa?
Yeah, good. Welcome.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Kia ora, Charles.
Yeah, just a quick point. Just looking at your PPR, Te Waio Hinanga is finishes off with the NGA instead of an NA, but sure you worked that out. Just go to that point of that people raise the difference between production forest and just carbon foresting. Is that the carbon forester doesn't actually have to apply to the stewardship rules of forestry, which forest production does. So they don't have to do the track planning, they don't have to put in fire breaks, they don't have to put in ponds for fire security. And I think the Minister for Forestry, which is Stuart Nash, who lives locally, he does intend to change all that and put native forest on an equal footing with the exotic forest. But I think he mentioned something about the 1st of Jan, won't be anything before then next year. So that is a good sign. But forestry farming is hard to compete with. The money looks too good, and much Valley is probably going to go that way as well around our district. So it is a matter of getting the best out of it. And if they can put more emphasis on the cost of, I think native farming is about a third the rate of the exotic forest. But that's
disappointing.
That is disappointing, yeah, it is. But
it's disappointing that our farm, our Māori owned land is going to be converted to forestry, because it also does our people out of jobs. They depend on those jobs in the freezer works. So what happens if you only can have so many pruners? So then you send our people to property.
I think the planning is that forestry does only have about three FTEs, whereas farms have about 10, with all the support people that are around the community that support it. So yeah, no, shouldn't have put you did right.
Thank you for that, Charles.
It is disappointing.
Pippa, did you have any comment?
No.
So thank you. So first and foremost, Pippa, thank you very much on behalf of the committee. We absolutely enjoyed your presentation. We look forward to catching up with you. along the way. No doubt the invites will arrive on your desk. And with that, can I have a move and a second to receive reports? Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Diane. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, carried. So we're going to have a swap around from item 10 and 11. So we're going to go to item 11, and then we'll come back to 10. Simon.
Simon.
Is this coastal hazards you're on?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair, for fitting us in, and just acknowledging Simon is dialing in from his office in Taupō. So look, this is an opportunity for us to provide an update as to where the Clifton to Tangai Coastal Strategy project is at. It's been a project that has been ongoing for some 8 years, and we're in the middle of some major decisions which will help the strategy forward over the next decade, hopefully. So I've put a bit of a summary paper here, updating you from the last time we were here, which was about 6 months ago, and Simon will just go through some of the key points, and then we're happy to answer any questions or comments you may have.
Thank you. Simon?
Kia ora koutou katoa. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So thanks for your time. I'll try and keep it brief. I know you've had a busy day today and you've got more to go. So look, in terms of high points, our last meeting with you was back in June, as Chris mentioned. We presented back then a mana whenua engagement plan and sought your feedback on it. We've since been implementing that plan, although as the paper outlines, haven't had a lot of success. I think our timing was terrible. With COVID impacting lots of organisations, it was hard to find space on agendas. So we did manage to have a couple of hui, which were great, but otherwise not much success, acknowledging how busy people are. We are continuing to try to engage though, and we'll keep up with that effort over the next few months. The second, I guess, major item to note is that the Hawke's Bay Regional Council will in May, June be launching a consultation process around its proposed new role, responding to coastal hazards. So this is off the back of a bunch of work with all the TAs in the region and our joint committee. The proposal is that HBRC will take the lead role going forward, and will consult on that suggestion in May, June through a Local Government Act process. And the last thing I think probably to note on this paper is the coastal ecology work stream. This is reasonably new, but I'll highlight it here because we are very keen to engage with mana whenua as part of rounding out our gap analysis. One of the things that's been regularly raised by mana whenua is a concern around, activities taken to respond to coastal hazards. Whilst that might make us more resilient, what are the downsides? What are the impacts of those activities? So one key thing that has been raised is nourishment, so adding gravel or sand to the beach, and what effect that might have on, for example, reef systems by smothering. So there's a bunch of stuff we have to understand and assess before we can launch into kind of the more targeted physical works programs. We have started with a gap analysis, work out sort of what we know and what we don't know in terms of coastal ecological values on this coastline. But what's missing is a more detailed conversation with mana whenua around things like tidal species and significant sites. So we're keen to have that discussion, and we're starting up a new work stream to look into that work over the next perhaps 6 months. I think those are really the high points. So rather than labour the paper any further, I'm more than happy to go to questions, Chair.
Thank you for that. Simon, I'm going to go straight to you, Peter.
Oh yeah, and just in regards to, and you touched on the point about mana whenua engagement, and then I suppose just we'd need to see an act, and you mentioned the report that it was a little bit light, and I suppose just speaking on behalf of Te Whanganui Aotearoa, obviously we're coastal hapu marae, and then around the engagement it has potentially been limited. I see that you had heretanga and that, and we'd need to be a part of any discussions moving forward, so our marae are represented within the conversation in regards to the strategy. Also, I suppose you would say Te Matau Māori, which is a collective of heretanga, taiwhenua, they would need, it's just, you talk about the representation, we need to make sure we've got representation on whatever decision that's going to be made that's involving Māori. So yeah, I support what you're saying, There needs to be a lot more work done in working with those groups, because it appears a little bit light when I look through some of the engagement process that's taken place. So just saying, moving forward, you've identified it, and let's put an action plan to address it. Yep.
Can you just elaborate a bit more, Peter, on the Te Māori coastal collective?
Okay, so Te Māori, that represents all our customary kaitiaki that's been appointed under an Act through the Fisheries Act that come through the fishery settlement. So our marae hapu, they've gone through and represented kaitiaki, the issue, and I suppose if you look at it from an operational perspective, they issue permits out on the moana for our whānau to gather kaimoana and take back for whatever's happening at the marae or within that community space. And so they've gone for an appointment process, which is in partnership with the Ministry of Primary Industries, and then the Minister signs off on those appointments of those kaitiaki to be appointed to undertake that role, and then they look after our customary process when our whānau are going out to gather kai, but they have a wider role as a kaitiaki to support any coastal development within the area. So that's why they're quite important in the role, because they've gone through a mandating process through the marae, the hapu, the iwi, and they've also gone through, if you look at governments engaged too, the ministers engaged, because he signs off on the appointment when they get appointed. So important part of the strategy for their engagement when we're working through that, because they're mandated twice, one by government and one, the first thing they're mandated by their people, and the second they're mandated by the Crown.
They are also a very active group, Simon, incredibly active. Any other questions for Simon? Mare?
Just up here, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that, Simon. I think too, when we look at the Tangoi or Clifton Coastal Hazard Strategy, it had a few tangata whenuas that got involved, and I sort of recall when other manas representing did the cultural impact assessment. Yeah, there are a few things that I think you've highlighted that I'd like to think we can keep the tabs on. I mean, any proposals to create the ability for easy consenting pathway and kotahi coming up for coastal works, estuary management, stormwater infrastructure upgrades, etc. Yeah, just need to keep a close tab on how those things go through those particular streamlined processes. And just to also ensuring that the transfer of powers from HTC or Napier City Council to the Hawke's Bay Regional Council does not weaken tangata whenua consultation requirements. You know, we've got within both councils Māori standing committees, and of course the Takoto Law and Napier City Māori Advisory as conduits for information spreading, and the use of statutory acknowledgements wherever possible to leverage off. But you did highlight, and I think it's really important, if possible, to undertake a coastal scan or map areas of particular significance at the hapu level. The operative CEP mentions that the whole of the CMA is of significance to Ngāti Kahungunu. A greater specificity detail is required at the consenting level. Kotahi will change parts of the RPS through kotahi engagement, so we need to strengthen RPS direction to regional plans so that they take into account not just cultural values, but also tikanga Māori hapu aspirations as well. So, you know, need to get these aspirations into objectives and rules for coastal hazard management, amongst other things. So just leave you with those thoughts.
Thank you, Mare. Any other comments, questions? So Simon and Chris, thank you both for your presentation. We absolutely appreciate it. Can I have Mare and Michelle to please move and second receiving reports? Yep. Thank you both. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Kia ora, accepted. Kia ora. Are we returning back to item 10? Oh, just before we go there, we did state at the start of this that we would try and push through our agenda before we have lunch. Yep. We're still happy?
Still happy.
All right, then let's go. Pushing. Number 10. Item 10, thank you. I'll be item 10. Item 10, please.
Kia ora, Chair. I'm on the screen and I'll be speaking to this paper. Look, I'll take the paper as read. I do want to just provide a little bit of context that perhaps the paper hasn't given you, given it's probably been a while since we talked about this topic. So a reminder that back in 2020, I undertook an effectiveness and efficiency review of our biosecurity and biodiversity functions. One of the findings of that review, amongst others, was that the way we're approaching possum management in the region is no longer fit for purpose and was significantly under-resourced. With council support and agreement, we've begun a process to change the way we do possum management, beginning with a change to our regional pest management plan. The regional pest management plan being the statutory document that sets up the rules and policies that support our biosecurity functions. And in particular, with the view that we want to have a very narrow change to the plan to allow council to operate large-scale possum control across the region within our possum control area boundary. And so I just really stress that it's a very narrowly focused change to the regional pest management plan, which was made operative just in 2019. The process we have to follow to do that is very prescriptive and set out in the Biosecurity Act. So there are 7 steps we have to follow, and we have to carefully follow those steps, which is what staff are busy doing at the moment. To support that process, we've pulled together a group that we had during the development of the fuller change to the regional pest management plan in 2019, called the Biosecurity Working Party. And the intent of the BWP, as we call it, is it's an advisory group. It's a group that will provide agile and quick access to advice and guidance and feedback as we develop the plan change and associated material. Stress that it's not a decision-making body, it's just a group to provide that sort of feedback and guidance on what we should do when we've got options or choices to make about things in the process. We had originally set about this whole exercise being concluded by the end of June this year to then operationalise the changes and start the new way of managing possums. But in engagement with council, there's been agreement that we're not in a position to finance the changed way of working for possums. It's a significant increase in cost to do that. And instead, what we're doing is focusing on getting the policy set, ready to go, and then working through the development of the long-term plan, the ways of working to deliver that and how it will be funded, who pays, all those sorts of things that are associated with it. In the development of the partial plan change, I should also point out that when we get to the point where we've got a proposal and we're moving into the formal parts of the process, it's a public process and people can make submissions, be heard, and if they wish, go right through to appeals. But it's effectively a formal statutory process. I guess the final point would be that the Bio-Working Party is meeting in May this year. As I'd mentioned, we'd intended to have it ready to go, this change ready to go by June, but following the discussion with council, there's no need for us to have it ready in June to operationalise the change, given that we're going to be doing that in a couple of years' time. So we're stretching out the timeframes a bit to allow us the ability to carefully work through the process. We've got COVID impacts on staff, and we've got staff turnover that's impacting our ability to, I guess, resource this whole exercise as well. So we're just slowing everything down a little bit to make sure that we don't miss any steps and that we get it right. And one of those key steps in May for the Bio-Working Party will be consideration of our engagement plan and process. and how we go about getting out there broadly and more widely to socialise it. As I've noted in the paper, we've had some initial informal discussions with the primary sector folk who are most closely connected to this, particularly Osprey, who are very busy in the region at the moment, following a massive TB outbreak in the region. So we've started some early conversations, but we haven't formally embarked in a formal engagement process yet. And then the last thing would be that, look, in the intervening couple of years until we're at the point where we've got the policy framework sorted and we've figured out ways of working and resourced it through the long-term plan development, we are scaling up our monitoring in the possum control area that we've got at the moment. So we've doubled effectively the monitoring we've got from approximately 200,000 hectares a year to 400,000 hectares a year, with the intent being that we'll use these 2 years to work out where we think the hotspots in the region might be with possum numbers. We will then use the existing provisions in our pest management plan to ensure that landowners are meeting their obligations in those areas, so that in essence, if you like, we can identify and tidy up those areas ahead of council taking on the broad scale contract management for possum control. So we just, and of course, using that information that we gather with the more intensive monitoring to also help us plan longer term and understand what the resourcing requirements will be for that large scale contract management. So Chair, I'll pause there and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ian, for that. This was one of the items on our pre-meeting discussion list this morning. And so I'm going to go to the board first. And can I go to you, Katarana, just to your kōrero to us this morning? And we'll start from there.
Tēnā rā koutou. Katarina here, just letting you know my commitment to the board, especially the pest management one. I just feel like I'm at 101 level, and I don't want to let down our team. And so I've taken it back to our Māori committee to find someone else to help back me up and tautoko the kaupapa still. Whilst I'm really right into biosecurity and pest management, it's just not my expertise. Mauri ora.
Ka pai, thank you for that, Katarina. Michelle, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, kia ora Katarina, and I have been hearing her karanga about, and we all got a whole lot of mahi we're doing around pest control. We have discussed this, and the review actually came out of my kōrero back in 2020, where we went into lockdown in the regional council. So that's what action that section 72. The thing is, we've been talking amongst ourselves, and Peter Eden has quite a bit of knowledge on pest control right on the ground and around operations of it. So we were hoping that Peter would be considering, because I believe Katarina doesn't want to sit on the working party, so with one of our Māori committee with support and with Peter's acceptance, that we recommend he sits on there. With the impact on Tātara Kina, his interests in pāhuera and Mohaka forestry, I think he'd be a good candidate for the working party.
Thank you for that. So we'll return back to that at the end of this report. So can we return back to the report? Was there any questions for Ian in regards to his report?
Yeah, I've got a question. And obviously with the expansion, and you talked about Osprey, Ian, and it'll be just, I suppose the concern would be, and I think Michelle highlighted it, it's just when it gets to that stage, it's going to be the types of control that's going to be used. And I know around the cost and the financial implications in that, but that'll be a conversation that comes up, because there's, I suppose, Māori around their Māori Aspirations Vs have strong feelings on types of control and what's done on their whenua. So, and we know about Tātara Kina case that took 20 years and went through the Māori Land Court for them to rule on it, but obviously about mitigating potential risk, and that's going to cause with all those other different Māori organisations that look at alternative methods to control. I just sort of better highlight that as a point, because I know that was a part of the Tatarikina case, and yeah, I attend some meetings and I've chaired some of those hui for whānau, and yeah, it was a very controversial, long part of the process that went on for a number of years. So yeah, I just sort of better highlight that, because that hasn't gone away. It's still there for those whānau that feel passionate about it. Nā mihi.
Ian, any feedback?
Chair, yeah, thank you. Look, really good points, and I think it's really helpful to get these things out early in the conversation to work them through. Just to be really clear, Hawke's Bay Regional Council doesn't use 1080, hasn't done for many, many years. We see that the primary method for control is going to be ground-based for our contracting in the future. I guess one of the advantages of us bringing in the contract management is that access to toxins going forward is going to be increasingly challenged. You may or may not be aware that there's a national review of brodifacoum, which is currently the primary tool for possum control outside of dock and osprey controlled areas. So most landowners can race into their merchant and buy brodifacoum off the shelf. That's highly likely to change in the future because it actually bioaccumulates in the environment. So access to toxins is going to become more problematic in the future. Us being able to run those things, have experienced, qualified contractors who know how to safely use the right tools in toxins in the environment will be really important. But I see this as very much a journey, not a destination. It's an incredibly evolving space in terms of pest and predator eradication. Techniques are changing all the time, and ways of working will be coming back to Council and this committee through the development of our long-term plan.
Any other questions for Ian in regards to his report? Just one from me, Ian. So you talked about using, I think, a ground-based framework in regards to possum control, and that would mean contractors. Has Hawke's Bay Regional Council given any consideration to jobs for nature? Because a lot of that jobs for nature, some of that was around pest control, and the potential, if you like, to help transition some of that workforce into a contractual full-time employment outside of that funding model.
Look, yeah, great question, Chair, and absolutely we have, and so effectively no decisions made in that space, and all doors are open really. What we're seeing is an opportunity in the development of capability and capacity in the space broadly across our operating environment, so not just in pest and predator control, but in our broader biodiversity programs through revegetation, fencing, a range of things where there are skilled groups of people being created that we want to be able to work out how we can bring them across into our work. So it's absolutely sort of front and centre, really. And just the final point would be that, look, we see there's going to be a lot more scope for contracting businesses in this space than less, obviously. There's a lot of work ahead of us. And we're really keen to have a diverse contracting base because we've got a diverse landscape and obviously a diversity of land ownership that we need to, in some cases, match the contractors to. So, yeah, wide open to those sorts of suggestions.
Peter?
I just got one to add to Mike's corridor.
I'll go to Peter first and I'll come up to you, Charles.
Yep. So just to add to Mike's corridor in regards to, and following on to what James has said around procurement contracts for the regional council, how they're going to build that with Māori, and I suppose we've got Johnson H, and we've got that workforce coming through, and then the council or James has signalled around procurement. So it'd be good to demonstrate that in the future as we move. Though I think those contracts are for 3-year period. And as those individuals, if they've got something to build towards at the end and it's part of the procurement contract status within the regional council, then it can be a building platform for those individuals to work to. So I totally support what Mike's saying, and then it's becoming part of the regional council policy, so it makes sense that should be built into the framework for those contractors to demonstrate how they've engaged with mana whenua to support them in that process. So
thank you for that. Charles?
Yeah, just a quick note on the use of 1080. We've been quite adamant that we don't really want 1080, and we've got a good ground team contractor that works for us now. But we do actually see a point of difference working co-management with DOC. We have a large block which is over right as part of the Uruwera National Park. And just below that, in Maunga Taniwha, which is inside our rohe there, in the Wairoa district, there is a large area being set aside for native reserve, and they're releasing a lot of brown kiwi there, which is obviously another endangered species. So the tactic is going to be every 3 years to put in 1080, and in between run ground teams. So we can see it's going to be more effective in the protection of the brown kiwi, to put a lot out and then release them then when they're having their chicks, and then follow it up with ground teams. So it's a combination of the lesser of two evils, I guess, in an effort to have that biodiversity kick off. So certainly in some of the forestry blocks, we continue with our ground team because it's better country for them to get into. We can't see a lot of the problems being with our hunters, and they can't actually get out to these outer blocks and not get into the national park anyway. So we're having to rethink our ideas, but not to shift too widely from the current path of ground teams. Kia ora.
Thank you. Ian, any final comments from you?
No, look, and just back to the original kōrero around Peter joining the team, love to have him. So if you're happy to support that, we'll get him added to the meeting agendas and get invites on his calendar.
Move, Michelle. Correct. Second, happy to second. Any further comment? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Kia ora, thank you. And we'll also, Michelle and Mike will also move the report.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Peter.
Ka pai. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Ian.
Kia ora.
Item 12.
Item 12.
Who's doing statutory? Have a seat.
Or Nicola.
You're standing between us and lunch.
Oh, a dangerous place.
I don't have the paper. I can't get into Stella. And normally James will have it up.
Were there any questions from members?
You having trouble with Stella too? Surprise.
Yeah, I did this morning.
Can we take the paper as
read?
And questions thereafter? We might be able to deal with that.
Okay. Any questions in regards to item 12? Looking at the board, no questions.
I just got one, and it's just popped up, and I had a quick look through. But it'll be at some stage to look at those takutai moana applications that are going through, the system, and then to update everyone just where they're sort of at, because I know the various ones are going through the court system and these appeals and just the status of the applications in the process.
So a regular update on how those applications are transversing through?
Yeah, just what's happening.
They're
so
actually
everyone
in
knows.
there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry, I just seen the little blurb and read.
So through you, Chair, the updates in the statutory advocacy report are those bits in red.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions? We'll take that as read then. Move to Api, second Hanawai. All those in favour, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Carried. Item 13.
Lucky with some.
So who's leading this, please?
Take it as read.
You're going to take it as read.
Sure.
Do any of those that sit on those committees just got any comments around your various committees that you feel you need to share? It's going to inform us.
And it's delivered with humour.
If not, we'll take them as read.
Did you want to share anything, Happy?
Thank you, Marge. Thank you, Diane. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, carried. Organisational activities, page 75. Anything to add?
I suppose, Mr Chair, for Wairau, there's a lot of focus on Mahi and Whakake, and I know there's been projects in there, but I expect there'll be some focus on the inland areas soon, Hawke's Bay Regional Council, considering what's just happened. Yeah, just keep on seeing the same thing, template, the same thing, Mahi, Whakake. Kia ora whānau, but there's a whole big district there of 1 million acres, so yeah, to see what else is being done. Other than the sheep pylon, I know that's been going on in the river mouth opening. Kia ora.
Thank you, Michelle. Is there anything else?
Just and it was a comment and Rick made it this morning, and it's just about the right tree for the right place pilot. So yeah, I suppose it's what is the right tree. You know, when you're looking at a financial modelling and that, and yeah, Indigenous tree or pine tree.
Thank you for that.
Indigenous.
I thought you'd say that.
Native, you mean. So any other partai? If not, can I have someone to move and second it? Thank you, Rick and Uppy. All those in favour, please say aye.
You're sharing the love, aren't you?
Oh, I do.
Aye.
Okay, we're going to minor items. Can we come back to you? About the drinking water, but
Kia ora, it's just in regards to the Wairau water supply on the Wairau River. Look, I had the meeting of a Taiao committee last week, and it was concerning that Ramoto Marae, Arimawhai and Rangiahu Marae were feeling sort of out of place, not having the same water supply as everybody else on the Wairau, from the town supply. We're still relying on rainwater through the tanks, and if we're going to be moving anywhere after the storm that we've just witnessed over the last couple of weeks, the Wairau River's been so hammered. I can't see why you wouldn't want to move the water supply in future. It's served us, the Wairau has served us all this time, but I look at the sediment and the 3 marae that are impacted in that very area. I'm sorry I failed to put up pictures today, but I've got some real gnarlies, but I'm really concerned about the Wairau water supply. Now, when I frequent town to see my family in town, and sponge a shower at their house now and again, I might come out all white with chloride and yeah, you do have to boil the water there. You do have to boil the water. It makes me wonder, is there a lot of fluoride going in our water? So the quality of our water is not that great. Can we look into it?
I'm glad to say that you don't stay white for long. So the other minor item was in regards to the elections, the upcoming elections, especially in regards to the Māori representation. So just to inform the council that there is a lot of interest.
Good.
From those that are wanting or considering putting themselves forward. The other part to this is perhaps there's not enough deep enough understanding as to what the actual role is and what does it mean to be a councillor on Hawke's Bay Regional Council and the role and responsibilities that come with that. I think it's important that I would hope that Hawke's Bay Regional Council would actually communicate, put in a program around communicating as we lead up to the elections, just what those responsibilities are. I think it's important that whoever's successful in being our representative actually comes into the role with a good understanding of what that role is, rather than get here and get a surprise. More importantly, give you a surprise because they don't quite fully understand the role. It's important that we get a good result for everybody in regards to whoever fulfills these positions. That's the part I wanted to raise.
Well, I think it's an excellent point.
Kia ora, Chair. Appreciating that this is a minor item and not for debate or discussion.
I'm going to debate it anyway.
But it's a lingering point that's worthy of a response, and that is our governance team are currently working on that as part of the pre-election. They haven't quite sort of landed that in terms of, say, a response to your question, let alone other aspects leading up to those Māori constituencies at one point.
I think the other point I would raise too is that there's recognition of the size of the constituency that these representatives will actually be covering compared to those of general councillors. It is significantly more. The obligations on them to actually get to feed back to the constituency is far greater than that of their colleagues. The other part to that, for the most part, they are northern and southern. They actually will be on their own. So yeah, so we can give consideration to that.
I wouldn't have thought. I'd hope they wouldn't be on their own.
Well, I think that's where we have got to look at in regards to the support that council give back. Ka pai?
Ka pai.
Anything? So thank you everybody for your participation this morning.
Relaxed, right.
And thank you for our extra half hour, but we got through. I'd just really like to recognise the nature of how we conducted ourselves today. And of course to our online whānau, thank you for those that take the time out either now or later on to come back and review our hui, which I know quite a few of our whānau do. So it's important that we play an important part in that overall informing our wider community. With that, ka huri kia koe api, he whakakapi a tātou hui, me te whakamoimiti a tātou kai.
Thank you. Mauri ora tātou. Just before we have our karakia, I missed the opportunity just to make a comment about the Transport Committee. You know, we're very fortunate. We have a good chair, Martin Williams.
Yes. Okay,
so he's able to engage everyone, you know, at these huis, which is really great. When we had our last hui, and we talked with Waka Kotahi about the speed limits on the Taupo Napier Road. You know, unfortunately for us and for everyone else, it was a done deal, it was a waste of time. Waka Kotahi had already decided. What was disturbing, I felt, the CEO apologised to mana whenua for the lack of consultation. You know, and for me that was a big issue. You know, and you know we talk about our government agencies and constitutional racism. You know, that people need to look into that agency because you know they made a decision, did not consult with, especially our whānau up at Ngāti Manuuru, Te Arato whānau. You know, in particular them. There was no consultation whatsoever. So you know, so there was lacking, eh? There was that was lacking. Okay, and so I thought I'd just bring that to your attention anyway. So anyway, kia tauta rangi Māori. Nā reira, mati atua tātou e manaki, e te aki, e a rahi roto tōna rangi Māori e tēnei rangi, me ngā rā e heke mai nei. Nā reira, descend upon us the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit, now and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Kia ora. Thank you, Api. Thank you to everybody online. Appreciate your input. We'll catch up with you later, Michelle.